Welcome to this Soundscape Books recording of The Shadow-Bound Crown, an exclusive fantasy novel written by Darian. Enjoy your listen.
Chapter 2, A Prince in Chains. The Queen's decree still echoed in the Obsidian throne room, Commander Kale still marshalling his guards for the chase, but Seraphiel Ashworth had already turned his back on their blind obedience. His intuition, a cold, insistent hand on his spine, guided him not towards the Shadowfell wastes, but back to the opulent, shadowed chambers of Lord Valerius. The air within was still and heavy, yet for Seraphiel's honed senses, it hummed with the same subtle, primal resonance, a chilling anomaly that defied the court's easy accusations and whispered of a far older, deeper darkness. Seraphiel moved with the quiet grace of a predator, his footsteps silent on the intricate, blood-stained rugs. The Obsidian guards, assigned to maintain the scene, stood at rigid attention, their faces pale beneath their dark helmets, their eyes flicking nervously towards the grotesque symbols still painted on the floor. They were unaccustomed to such raw, alien magic, and their discomfort pleased Seraphiel in a perverse way. It meant he wasn't imagining the difference. He knelt by the perimeter, his silver-ringed fingers hovering just above the dried, clotted script. The stench of iron was less potent now, but a faint, almost imperceptible coldness radiated from the symbols, a chill that had nothing to do with the drafts through the grand, shuttered windows. It was an ethereal cold, as if the very air had been stretched thin, vibrating at a frequency his normal senses couldn't quite grasp. To most, blood magic was a primal force, drawing on the life essence, often crude, sometimes elegant, but always rooted in the living. The Nightfall lineage, as Chancellor Vesperian had been so eager to point out, was known for its wild, untamed expressions of this art, their umbralkin pacts twisting blood into dark, shadowy manifestations. But what Seraphiel felt here was different, older, deeper. It was as if the blood had been a conduit not for power, but for a memory, a resonance from a time before the court, before the established practices. He closed his eyes, focusing inward, letting his own purified blood hum beneath his skin. This was his sanctioned ritual, the one that made him the finest interrogator Thessarian had ever known. He reached out with his senses, extending tendrils of his own refined blood magic, not to alter or manipulate, but to read, to feel the echoes. The faint hum intensified, morphing into a low, resonant thrum against his psychic awareness. It was like listening to the deep, slow heartbeat of the earth itself, rather than the quick, desperate pulse of a recently spilled life. The symbols pulsed faintly, not with the raw, chaotic energy of uncontrolled blood magic, nor the disciplined, structured flow of court-sanctioned practices. Instead, it was an ancient, almost primordial thrum, quiet yet immense. He imagined it as the slow, inexorable turning of cosmic gears, or the deep, silent current of an underground river. He traced the air above a particularly complex sigil, feeling the arcane residue clinging to it like a spectral mist. "It's not what they think," he murmured, his voice a low, rough rasp in the silence. The court saw chaos and destruction, yes, but they attributed it to the familiar chaos, the one they had banished. This felt like a different kind of chaos, one that predated their understanding. It was too precise, too subtle in its underlying resonance, too purposeful. The Nightfall magic, particularly that associated with the umbralkin, was known for its aggressive, consuming nature. It drained, yes, but it often left a viscous residue, a lingering scent of ozone and shadow, and it demanded a heavy toll on the wielder, draining their vitality in return. Here, there was only that clean, utter emptiness, and this ancient, cold echo. A vampire's work, perhaps, but Valerius's body had shown no bite marks, only the single, precise incision. This was blood magic, yes, but twisted to a forgotten art. It wasn't the wild, uncontrolled magic of Temius Nightfall, not as the court understood it. It was something else entirely. Something colder, more calculated, and infinitely more dangerous. He stood, dusting off his trousers. He had what he needed. The court would have its scapegoat, and he would play along for now. But his true investigation had just begun. While Seraphiel delved into the forgotten whispers of ancient magic, the Obsidian Keep's council chambers buzzed with a different kind of energy, the predictable, self-serving fervor of fear and prejudice. Chancellor Vesperian, a gaunt man whose smile never quite reached his eyes, stood before Queen Isolde, his voice a silken thread weaving through the heavy air. "My queen," he began, his hand pressed against his chest in a gesture of feigned humility. "The evidence is undeniable. The symbols, the ritualistic draining, these bear the unmistakable hallmarks of the Nightfall lineage. Their pacts with the umbral kin, their history of unbound, destructive power, it is all well documented. The prophecies spoke of their return, of shadows consuming the very heart of Thessarian." Queen Isolde sat on her obsidian throne, her slender frame burdened by the heavy crown, her face a mask of weary resolve. The initial shock of Lord Valerius's death had given way to a palpable tension, a pressure from her council to act decisively. She knew Vesperian's manipulations, could almost taste the ambition beneath his words, but the court demanded a swift response, and Temius Nightfall was a conveniently exiled villain. "Commander Kale," Isolde's voice was low, yet it carried the weight of her authority, cutting through the murmurs of the court. "You are to lead the apprehension. Take a contingent of our finest guards. Bring Prince Temius Nightfall back to the keep. Bound, if necessary. I want him questioned." Commander Kale stepped forward, his polished black armor gleaming even in the dim light of the chambers. Kale was a man forged from the court's rigid dogma, his loyalty absolute, his disdain for unbound magic a foundational pillar of his existence. He was the embodiment of the court's prejudice, a blunt instrument perfectly suited for the task. "It will be done, my queen," Kale boomed, his voice resonating with a zealous pride. "The Nightfall curse will be broken once and for all. This blasphemy will be answered. The Shadowfell wastes will yield its rogue prince." His eyes, hard and unyielding, swept across the frightened faces of the assembled nobility, daring any to question the court's righteous judgment. He strode out of the chambers, his guards already forming ranks outside, their weapons glinting in anticipation of the hunt. The court murmured its approval, a collective sigh of relief that a clear enemy had been identified, a comfortable target for their fear. The journey to the Shadowfell wastes was swift and brutal, a testament to Commander Kale's efficiency and the court's desperation. The wastes lived up to their name, a desolate, forgotten region on the fringes of Thessarian, where the earth was cracked and barren, and the sky seemed perpetually bruised. Whispers claimed it was home to the true umbral kin, those ancient entities whose shadows writhed with a life of their own. It was a fitting exile for Temius Nightfall, a prince whose very existence defied the court's ordered world. As dusk began to paint the western sky in hues of bruised purple and angry orange, the gates of the Obsidian Keep groaned open, a deep, resonant sound that echoed across the courtyard. A column of obsidian guards marched in, their armor stained with dust and the faint metallic tang of a skirmish. At their center, bound in heavy, enchanted chains that shimmered with suppression runes, was Temius Nightfall. Seraphiel stood in the shadowed alcove of an archway overlooking the main courtyard, observing. His presence was like a deeper shadow, unnoticed by the clanking guards and the few brave servants who peered from windows. He watched Temius approach, his analytical mind already dissecting every detail. The prince was a stark contrast to the opulence of the keep. His dark hair, once meticulously styled, hung in lank strands, framing a face too pale, too sharp, almost gaunt. But it was his eyes that commanded attention. They were a profound, unsettling black, not merely dark, but absorbing light, shot through with an almost imperceptible shimmer, like oil on water or the iridescence of a beetle's wing. It was the mark of his connection to the umbral kin, a subtle, ethereal light that seemed to emanate from the depths of his being. His clothes were simple, travel-worn leather and linen, a stark contrast to the silken robes of the court nobles. Yet, despite the chains that bound his wrists and ankles, restricting his movement, there was an undeniable, silent grace to him, a predatory fluidity that even the heavy manacles could not entirely stifle. He moved like a trapped beast, dangerous even when cornered. Commander Kale, bristling with self-importance, marched beside him, his voice booming for all to hear. "The Prince of Shadows returns to his cage. Let it be known, Thessarian, that justice is swift." Temius, his head held high, offered Kale a slow, cynical smile. It was a smile devoid of warmth, hinting at a dark humor that had seen too much. "Cage, Kale, or a comfortable tomb? At least in the wastes the shadows are honest. Here they wear crowns and hide behind pious platitudes." His voice, though rough from disuse, carried a surprising resonance, a low, captivating timbre that made the guards around him shift uncomfortably. But there was a subtle strain to it, a faint rasp that hinted at the toll of his exile. The umbral kin pacts demanded constant vigilance, a draining of his own essence to maintain the balance with the shadows. Kale snarled, tightening his grip on Temius's shoulder, the iron of the glove digging into the prince's pale skin. "Silence, abomination! You will answer for Lord Valerius's death, and for every sin your cursed line has brought upon this realm." Temius merely scoffed, a soft, dismissive sound that seemed to mock the commander's bluster. Valerius? What, did the old codger choke on his own hypocrisy? Or did the court finally decide he knew too much? Seraphiel felt a peculiar jolt at Temius's words. Knew too much. It echoed his own internal suspicions. The court's narrative was too clean, too convenient. Temius's defiance, his sharp, cynical intelligence, immediately set him apart from the brutish, wild monster Kale had described. As they drew closer to the main keep entrance, Temius's gaze, sharp and unyielding, swept across the courtyard, as if taking in every shadowed corner, every frightened face. And then, his eyes, those deep, shimmering abysses, found Seraphiel's. It was only for a breath, a fleeting moment across the torch-lit space. But in that instant, a profound, almost electric current passed between them. Seraphiel, ever composed, ever analytical, felt an inexplicable, unsettling pull. It wasn't merely the recognition of a powerful magical presence. He was accustomed to that. This was different. A resonance within his own blood, a primal chord struck by Temius's very being. It was like two opposing magnets, repelling and attracting in the same terrifying breath. Temius's gaze held no fear, no surprise, only a knowing, almost challenging glint, as if he had expected Seraphiel to be there, watching from the shadows. A silent question, and a subtle invitation to a game Seraphiel hadn't known he was playing. The guards shoved Temius forward, breaking the connection. They led him through the grand archway, down into the cool, silent depths of the Obsidian Keep's dungeons, the clanking of his chains echoing like a macabre drumbeat. The heavy doors slammed shut, sealing the prince within. The chains had delivered Temius Nightfall to the deepest cells of the Obsidian Keep as dusk fell, but Seraphiel knew this was no end, only a grim beginning. The true investigation wasn't merely about finding a killer. It was about understanding the shadowed forces that had dared to strike at the heart of the kingdom, forces that seemed to echo in the very presence of the captive prince. Tomorrow, with the first light, Seraphiel would descend into the cold confines of his sanctum's interrogation cells. He would look into the eyes of the man they called a monster, and perhaps find a partner, or a different kind of monster entirely. But Seraphiel's chilling premonition whispered of a far grander, far more ancient truth than any simple murder. He felt it in the arcane resonance of the crime scene, in the unsettling silence that followed the prince's capture. A truth that pulsed with dark energy, a truth that could shatter Thessarian. The chains on Temius Nightfall held more than just a prince. They held the key to an unholy darkness, and perhaps the reluctant hand of Seraphiel Ashworth himself, for a path was about to open where the lines between hunter and hunted, justice and desperation, would blur beyond recognition.
Thank you for listening to this Soundscape Books recording of Chapter 2 of The Shadowbound Crown, a fantasy novel written by Darian Cross. We hope you have enjoyed it. Please subscribe so you do not miss the next chapters and our new releases. Goodbye for now.